Welcome to Lecture 2, Elements of Cooperative Administration. Introduction. In our first lecture, we discussed the meaning of cooperative administration by looking at some definitions of cooperative administrations provided by well-known scholars and writers. We also attempted to highlight some of the issues and topics covered by the subfield of public administration. In this lecture, we will be seeking to know the key elements or characteristics of cooperative administration, that is, things that are common to most studies on cooperative administration. To make it clearer, elements of cooperative administration are those things which can easily notice or perceive when we read 2 or 3 books or articles bordering on cooperative administration. Course objectives. After reading this lecture, you should be able to explain what elements of cooperative public administration mean. 2. List some of the elements or characteristics of cooperative administration. 3. What discipline or disciplines share these elements with cooperative administration? Then 4. Explain why these disciplines share similar characteristics with cooperative administration. Content. Since its inception during the Second World War, cooperative public administration has evolved gradually into a very important area of study. Yet, it exists in a subsidiary relationship to comparative politics and public administration. Indeed, because cooperative public administration seeks to use methods that are typical to cooperative politics, its defining elements or characteristics are similar to that of comparative politics. Some of these elements which define cooperative administration have been identified by Rumki Basu, 1994. According to him, these elements are the same as those defining cooperative politics, which we may regard as its sister subdiscipline. They include analytical and empirical investigation, study of infrastructure, emphasis on developing countries, preference for an interdisciplinary approach, and focus on building value through political theory. Let us take these 5 elements, one after the other, in more details, starting with analytical and empirical investigation. Analytical and empirical investigation. The development of comparative public administration has been shaped by the development in behavioralism in the political science discipline, and more specifically in the discipline of public administration. With the behavioral revolution, the discipline of political science has shifted from the description of institutions or the preoccupation with normative issues like the issue of what is right or wrong and what it ought to be. While normativism and the tendency to describe still remain an integral part of political science and political administration, analyses that are empirically based, that is, studies that seek to know what is actually obtainable in the real world, have become fashionable. Also, traditional studies on cooperative public administration had tended to historicize governmental institutions, tracing their developmental trajectory. However, recent focus diverges from the wholly normative and institutional emphasis of the traditional comparative public administration. The tendency is to view administrations as action systems whose action, functioning, or operation are largely dictated by individuals who man them. Hence, the way they function may be different from their formal and legal allocated functions. This line of thought has come out very strongly in Frederick's conception of the pragmatic model. Riggs argued that the spread of Western political institutions to non-Western societies had led to a situation where the institutions were merely formalistic. In other words, they were patterned after Western models, but the reality was that there were always cultural differences between imported practices and norms and deeply entrenched traditions and values. 2003. Thus, the situation was always fraught with tension and conflicting interests. Emphasis on the study of infrastructure. The behavioral shift in public administration has led to the emphasis on the behavior and action rather than formal institutions. This point has been earlier mentioned but needs to be further stressed. Previous studies on comparative administration focused largely on the constitutional assigned roles of public institutions as well as on their history. However, recent studies in the social and management sciences have emphasized the impact of human action and have shifted the emphasis to how people behave within administrative institutions and the impact of the institutions on human behavior. So today, the building blocks for theory building are the individual, organization, and behavior of the three categories. The first two are more tangible, though they require a better conceptualization. Thus, as Peter has noted, the study of individuals that work in public sector of country has created an agenda for itself. For example, the number and nature of the employees in the public sector serves as an indicator of the size of the public sector and the way in which the latter pervades society, thus injecting a relationship between civil society and public administration into the analysis. Focusing on developing countries. The third element or characteristics of comparative administration is the tendency to focus on developing countries. As we saw it in lecture 3, the development of comparative public administration was underpinned by the need to understand political institutions and administrative behaviors in developing countries. This was against the backdrop of mass disillusionment in Western academy over the modernization project. During the 1950s and 1960s, Western scholars believed that the modernization of political institutions along Western lines was the sole path to development, and that the adoption of the political and economic institutions that conformed with Western institutions would lead to development in non-Western societies. But realities did not meet expectations, and indeed the modernization project failed to unleash the expected results. It was partly for this reason that various academic forums were constituted in Western academia to engage with these problems. One of the novel and pioneering efforts was Riggs' administration in developing countries. The theory of primastic societies. Riggs attempted to account for the contradictory forces that were impeding the development agenda in developing societies. According to Riggs, what explained the phenomenon was the contradiction between Western institutions and values and the social-cultural context which they were adapted into. That is 1964, Rodman, 1968. To put it differently, in the context of colonization and its aftermath, Western values merely displaced the old traditional values. They did not replace them. Hence, they merely marked the existence of these values under a different milieu. Focus on developing countries have remained an integral part of the study of comparative public administration since its inception. Although developed countries have been brought increasingly within the radar, not merely as models but as societies to be modeled in certain areas where their administrative systems are defective. Emphasis on the development of a value-free theory. The fourth element we shall be looking at is emphasizing on developing a value-free theory. Comparative public administration, like other disciplines, is oriented towards the development of a value-free theory. That is, theories that have not been excessively colored by the ideologies and viewpoints of the theorists. This point was earlier buttressed with the copious reference of the works of Fredericks. The development of comparative public administration was involved by the need to account for why developing countries and administrative problems, in spite of the resemblance of former political institutions with the West. To account for this problem, scholars and practitioners of comparative public administration have embarked on development of schemes and models with the express intent to explaining the situation. For example, in Riggs' conceptualization of the problem with developing countries, he contends that the reason for divergence in the trajectory of development in the contemporary transitional society as opposed to developed traditional society is that the former have exogenous institutions that function in ways that are different from the social and cultural values of the society. Fred calls such society prismatic society. A prismatic society is indeterminate, heterogeneous, and contradictory, and power is the most sought out value. Such societies are characterized by insecurity, inequality, negative administrative and political development requirements based on attainments, and marked difference between formal and effective administrative institutions. These attributes constitute what may be referred to as the ecology of prismatic model. Riggs, 1964. Preference for interdisciplinary approaches. A fifth element of comparative administration we should discuss is preference for interdisciplinary approaches. Comparative public administration has an interdisciplinary range. This is keeping to the trend in the post-behavioral epoch, where There is a great value in combining insights from different disciplines. Thus, through the use of an interdisciplinary framework, comparison can be conducted in such a way that important issues bordering on other disciplines can be analyzed. Take for example, financial, sociological, historical, demographic factors, etc. These methods can help in exhausting the range of issues under investigation rather than addressing the issues in a manner bereft of rigor. Ethnocentrism and Eurocentrism. The last elements or characteristics of the studies in comparative administration borders on ethnocentrism and Eurocentrism. From what you have learnt in the previous lectures, you will perhaps have noted the damning attribution ascribed to non-Western societies. Like the idea that non-Western societies are traditional, non-modern, primastic, backward, ancient, undeveloped, clueless, etc. These adjectives has been used repeatedly to describe societies that are not viewed as seeing similar values with Western systems. This practice is dictated by the claim to omnipotence and infallibility of Western modes of thinking and consequent denigration and relegation of ideas that are born out of the imagination of the other non-Western society. Summary. In this lecture, we have attempted to highlight and explain the key elements or characteristics of comparative public administration. By this, we mean the tendencies that are likely to be implicated when we undertake a study or read a book about comparative public administration. One of such elements is the emphasis on analysis and imperialism. In other words, the issue raised must have reference in reality. In other words, the focus is on what is and not what ought to be. Moreover, the express intent of theory building is to develop a value-free theory that is capable of explaining phenomena. We also saw that developing countries occupy a central place. After all, it was due to the need to explain the dilemma of developing society that led to the academic development of comparative public administration. Besides, in the analysis of comparative public administration, the emphasis is on three areas: individual, organization, and behavior. Lastly, comparative public administration is interdisciplinary in character since it borrows across the social science for analytical insights. One of the negative elements is, however, that comparative administration is Eurocentric and ethnocentric. This is the end of lecture 2. Thank you for listening.